Good evening, everybody. It is Monday. It's the 9th of August. You're here at Neuro at Night. Tonight, we have our guest speaker, as we've advertised, Dr. Marvin Berman. He's been here before. I'm not going to do any kind of an introduction other than to say he's doing great research. He's with the Quietmind Foundation. He will cover all that. He'll talk about his research a bit. They're using a lot of work with the V lights and the helmets, of which I have one. Doing great stuff. He's going to give us an update. So, Marvin, without any further delay on my part, it's all yours.
Thank you, Robert. Hi, everybody. It's great to be back. I feel like I should do some kind of stand-up routine. This is my third
Mhm.
time here. Um, but it's kind of like, where were we when last? It's like one of those serial westerns, with the woman tied on the train tracks and the music coming up, and the guy
Mhm.
with the handlebar mustache making weird, menacing noises. Anyway, we have been working on this idea of integrating in a in a comprehensive way the three components of non-invasive integrative healthcare that involve neurofeedback, photobiomodulation, and functional medicine. And Quiet Mind got started about 20 years ago looking at how do we get more evidence into the peer-reviewed literature about neurofeedback and alternative approaches to treatment. So we started a foundation to get funding to do that, and we also created our own institutional review board so that we didn't have to suck up to academia and play that game in order to get papers into the peer-reviewed publications. So where we are now is that we've published a number of studies on neurofeedback and its impact on neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. And we've also done some smaller pilot studies on the use of photobiomodulation, which is the delivery of light into the body. And we're using specifically near infrared light that is in the 1060 to 1080 nanometer range on the spectrum, so it's not visible light. And we've been pulsing it at 10 hertz. The impact of that original study with neurofeedback was that we saw that we could modify people's memory deficits and their behavioral deficits by using neurofeedback and using the QEEG as a way of figuring out what kind of protocol to do. But essentially what we were doing was training people to decrease frontal slow wave activity and increase mid-range beta. And because what happens in all cases, or most cases of neurodegeneration, as people become more demented, the slow wave amplitudes go up and the fast wave amplitudes go down. And so we took neurology's own data and showed that you can use neurofeedback to modify that pattern of activity, and that the result was that people's memory and behavior did improve, but still you had a neurodegenerative process going on. So you weren't curing anything, but you were changing the slope of decline, as it were. So that was a good thing, but we wanted to go the rest of the way, and we found that the photobiomodulation was actually a tissue level intervention. So you're actually delivering light energy directly into the brain or the body, depending on where you put the light. But we were focused transcranially on this study. And so we were focused on getting the light into the brain, all over the brain. And so we had a device that would cover the entire skull, but also deliver light directly into people's eyes. So there was intraocular and transcranial stimulation for the study that you're looking at that we presented at the International Alzheimer's meeting last week. So what we got the first time around in our basic pilot studies was that people could, in fact, improve their functioning just by taking the infrared light and using it 6 minutes twice a day for a month. And we saw that and we published that in 2017. And now we got funding to do a more advanced trial. And we got our study partner is Jason Wang, who's my co-investigator, and he's the chairman of the neurosurgery department at Baylor Scott and White Hospital in Temple, Texas. And they're the affiliate hospital group with Texas A&M School of Medicine. And Professor Wang he's a full professor at Texas A&M in neurosurgery, but he's also a DOD and an NIH reviewer. So he checks all the boxes about people who should know what they're talking about. So
All right, well,
IRB at Texas A&M and Baylor Scott and White, they looked at it and shook their heads and said, whatever. And we did a safety study, and all they cared about was that the adverse events were zero. They didn't care pretty much about anything else, but that meant that because we ran a safety trial and the adverse events were zero, they would then approve a 100-person study that was multi-site. It was 40 people were done in Texas, in Philadelphia, and 60 were done in Texas. So the basic model was to have people with mild to moderate diagnoses of dementia enrolled into the trial, and the measurement of dementia as mild to moderate was the mini mental status exam, the screening test, and they had to have a test scored between 15 and 24. And they, met the other inclusion criteria. And so they were then enrolled, and we ran a battery of neuropsych testing, and we did a quantitative EEG. Eyes open and closed, 8 minutes each. And they took the unit home. They were instructed on how to use it 6 minutes twice a day. And they came back in a month. We did another version of the neuropsych battery. We did another QEEG. They went back and did another month of treatment, and then they came in for a final neuropsych battery and QEEG. So that's the data set. We gave the caregivers a set of questionnaires to complete. So we had kind of real life, what's it like for this person day to day kind of data that we could also use in the analysis. Okay, so that's essentially what the study was. And we ran the trial. Our group finished about 3 months after the Texas group. And so the Texas group published on 69 subjects, and that paper has been published, and it's indexed now in Medline, and you can download it from the Quietmind website in the equipment section under the CognitoLite device. The paper is there for download. It's in a PDF format. But this paper, that paper only reported on the neuropsych testing. It didn't report on the QEEG because that's not what they do. They were waiting for us to do the QEEG analysis. So this poster is our first pass at the data on the QEEG, and we're also sharing some of the neuropsych battery data in terms of the mini mental exam changes, as well as the outcomes from the clock drawing test. And so here you are. We got about a 4.8 point improvement on average in the treatment group, and about a 1.6 improvement in the placebo group, which wasn't significant. And we saw about a 70% increase in the quality of the clock drawing tests. I think you can expand those pictures, zoom in a bit, and you can see the pre-post changes are rather dramatic in terms of the clock drawing. So it was about a 70% improvement in treatment versus control. There was also, I didn't put it in here, the trails A and B. the time to completion of both trails A and B was about 24% shorter with the treatment group than compared with the, there was no change in the placebo group, but it was a 24% shorter time to completion of the test, which is a fairly significant outcome as well. I guess we're going to hold questions till later. So so in terms of the aggregate microvolt change, remember I said that people with dementia increase their slow wave amplitudes and they decrease the faster wave amplitudes. So I appreciate your questions very much. Is that the changes, the blue regions are indicating reductions in the slow frequency amplitudes. And so this will correlate very directly with the improved memory and executive functioning. So the brain is not producing the increased amount of activity that you would ordinarily want to see when someone's asleep. That amount of activity is now decreased, so the brain is now capable of focusing and attending and therefore remembering better. If we go up to the absolute power group mean changes, there we can see that the decreased slow wave power associated with improved efficiency is also there on the right side. So, and also you can see the significant level in the delta activity in the front is now significantly decreased. As far as the sensory motor activity, we wanted to see increased SMR, and in fact, we did. So all in all, this was just a quick and easy way to introduce to the Alzheimer's research community the idea that a non-invasive, non-drug, easily deployed, self-administered, low cost, and immediately available alternative treatment model could produce significantly positive results in people with mild to moderate dementia. And that pretty much covers what I wanted to share about the poster. But where this went for me was kind of a repeat of the situation back in 2016 when I first discovered the V-Light, and I was looking for something
basis within the next couple of days.
a possible replacement or a possible device that could be offered to the subjects in our original clinical trials with the Cognitolight, where I was then going and finishing up with subjects and saying thank you for participating, and then I would get ready to leave and the husband or the wife would hand me their checkbook, and I'm like, what are you doing? And they're like, well, what, go buy another one. I'm like, what do you mean? And like, you can't have it back. I'm like, wait, that's not how this works. You can't, I'm not selling these things. They're not a product. And the person looked at me and said, ask me if I care. Look at my husband, look at my wife. You can't have it back. Like, just go get another one. And I realized they're right. So we figured out how we could do that without getting in trouble with the FDA, but it's still a very expensive device. So I was looking for a less expensive device, and that's when I found the V-Light and the Neuro device. And they were offering a 10 hertz and a 40 hertz, transcranial photobiomodulation treatment with intranasal stim, as well as the stuff on your head. So I was happy, and I started using that with people and offering that to folks. And we collected a bunch of data, and we saw that, in fact, it does help people. But one of the things that always nagged me was the fact that I only had two options. I could only pulse at 10 hertz or 40 hertz. Well, we know that people have frequency deficits, amplitude deficits, or overactivations at frequencies that happen to be other than 10 and 40. So what about that? So I put that out to Lou Lim years and years ago, and he took the information and put it into his development process. And they're soon going to be coming out with a device that will allow people to pulse different frequencies. But they still are using only 6 diodes. And what I wanted was something that would give much broader stimulation. So I found a device, and if anybody who's on wants to go take a look, you can go to the Quietmind Foundation website. Or Richard, can you give me the screen and let me put this up here?
Or I'm on your website right now.
Oh, okay. If you go to equipment
Yep,
and
I'm
then
there.
go down to the the transcranial near-infrared photobiomodulation therapy, you'll see it looks like a bike helmet.
Right, the one
And
that I have.
you got that? Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. So if you click on the little pictures down below, the middle picture,
Mm-hmm.
what I wanted to show is that little black box, that touchscreen keypad, now provides the capability with either the 810 nanometer light or the 1070 nanometer light. But what we can now do is we can set the pulse rate to anything from 1 to, I mean, 20,000 is meaningless, but we can set the pulse rate to anything we want. Leave it at that. The intensity is also manageable because we can set the percentage of power that the LEDs are putting out. So we can really manage the whole issue of overdose and the dose response curve by being able to go from 25 to 50 to 75% power and still have the pulse rate. If we go to 100% power, we lose the pulse capability. And I don't want to get into a whole conversation about pulsed versus continuous, but there may be benefit to one or the other depending on what's going on. And that's the kind of conversation that I would have with people individually who get this system. And then I'm going to provide about 3 months of no cost coaching to make sure that they're getting the most out of it and they know what they're doing, and we avoid any kind of problems with dose response to the stim. But now we can get, you can do a new mind analysis, find out where the frequency deficits are, the amplitude deficits or the excess, and we can then do harmonics or we can do straight frequency stimulation to either increase or decrease the amplitude, whatever it is that we need to be doing. The fact that there's a full transcranial stimulation going on means that all of the mitochondria down in the cortex, maybe 1 to 3 centimeters into the cortex, are going to get stimulated, which means we're going to be increasing ATP across the whole cortex. And you can slide the helmet around, so you can slide it back and get the cerebellum and the basal ganglia, as well as sliding it forward and get full frontal lobe stimulation as well. That pretty much gives you the idea of where we are now with this type of device. And what I'm going to be able to do very soon is change the screen, the screen that you're looking at on the black box. And what we'll be able to do is set up protocols so that we can have up to 8 different steps of treatment being delivered in sequence over the course of a treatment session. So we can have different pulse rates for different amounts of time at different intensities. We can also turn off certain areas and only stimulate other areas. So that's going to be one of the things that we're looking forward to. with clinicians and also with patients to be able to set up very specific protocols for treatment over time, rather than having to stop the session and start something. It'll be far more organized and automated, and I think that's going to make a big difference in terms of how well this is going to serve in terms of integration with neurofeedback over the next while. And I think that we'll see this as a great primer for neurofeedback training. I think it's also going to be a great standalone treatment for folks before they're maybe ready for neurofeedback, or if they don't want to do neurofeedback, whatever. I think that this is going to be a really useful tool. And what we're hoping is that over time, if we get, if this gets popular enough, we're going to be able to twist the arm of the people who are making this and, cut this price in half. So that's what we're looking forward to. And with that, I will open the floor for comment and question.
Marvin,
Go.
going back to the helmet.
Yep.
How many different areas or zones are there in there that can be programmed?
Today, 2. I wouldn't recommend. I mean, the way they set it up, there are 2 zones: occipital and central, and parietal and prefrontal. But what we're working with them on is getting it to provide quadrant control. So we'll be able to do left and right and front and back.
When might that happen?
I have to say, don't hold your breath. And on the other hand, they're telling me sometime in the next couple, 3-4 months.
Okay.
But
And so if somebody has one of those now, if you have one of these, if you have one of these
now, yeah, the 2 zones now are occipital and central and parietal and prefrontal.
and if they update the software, will that be something that could happen with these existing units, where you just get a software update?
I wish that were true. They're going to have to redesign the PCB in the helmet. So you're going to have to buy a whole new helmet.
Gotcha.
So there's no left-right capability.
There's no left, right, or front or back. There's no left, right now.
Unless you put the helmet on sideways.
Well, obviously, yeah. I mean, you can manipulate. Yes, of course, you can manipulate the helmet, but that's not, that's not what's being raised here.
Okay.
But yeah, you can also.
Go ahead. This
You
is
will. I mean,
this is a half-joking question.
But it's not the optimal. Okay. When we get the 4 quadrant control, that'll be a significant advance.
Okay. A half-joking question. Can you put it on your face for tightening up your skin?
You know that I don't want to mix. God damn it! I don't want to mix cosmetic with neurodegeneration, because everybody then goes, "Oh, this is a bunch of crap."
Well, wait a minute. But one of the devices that you lay down, and it's an arch over your face, there was at least a single case where it helped something in their eyeballs.
I completely understand. It's just that when this goes out on on YouTube, and people hear me saying, "Oh yeah, you can use this on your face to get rid of wrinkles," it becomes, it's just yes, it will affect elastin. Yes, it will affect wrinkles. Yes, we've done some small studies with the wrinkle removal, and no, there isn't a device per se to do that with. And could you use this to do it? Yes. But really, I want to focus on Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and traumatic brain injury.
So this is not a V-like device then. This is one of Dr. Lim's.
This is not, no, this is not a V-like.
Hi, it's Lisa. I have a question, Marvin. Do you know about the new helmet from South Korea that's coming out that does QEEG and photobiomodulation together?
Yeah, the imedysync is going to be doing some, I think it's going to be an interesting device. I'm sorry that they're making their data proprietary, but you know, everybody wants to make money and have a business model the way they want to do it. No, I think that they will have they'll have an interesting product, and I'm hoping that we can collaborate with them. They've expressed interest in what we're doing, and we've certainly communicated with them. So I hope we can get something, you know, we can get some kind of dialogue going that improves, you know, the delivery of this kind of treatment.
So let's say we're using it in conjunction with neurofeedback.
Right.
What would you describe as the optimal way to do it?
You'd send me clinical information and we would talk about where they're at, and then we would figure out what the protocol needed to be from there. I would generally say that based on the cue, we would set the pulse frequency. Based on their sensitivity, we would set the intensity, and then over time we would have a conversation with the patient and you to see how things are going and modify accordingly.
Would you do the PBM prior to the neurofeedback? Or
Ordinarily, I would do it that way to begin with, for sure.
Now,
Because
what
you
about
might be having this person, well, if the person's doing it themselves at home, they're probably going to do something in the morning and something in the late afternoon if it's a neurodegenerative issue. If they're doing it in the office in relation to neurofeedback training with you, then you'd schedule them for 15 minutes before their appointment to come in and use the helmet.
Now, one of the things I think I heard you say at another time or read in other studies is the best way to do this is to do it every day. So,
oh yeah, this is a vitamin. It's not an antibiotic.
So if it's a vitamin and somebody's coming in twice a week for neurofeedback, would you say there is still value?
Certainly.
Can you speak more to that?
Some support is better than no support. And if they're coming regularly, then they will be getting some degree of regular support, plus they're warming up their brain and making their brain more, increasing the plasticity so that to whatever degree they're going to be doing the neurofeedback, they're going to get more benefit out of the neurofeedback. And hopefully it will encourage them to, get a unit and do it at home.
Yeah, Judy, let me share with you. I have one of these helmets, and I consulted with Marvin with 2 people initially, and they were coming in both 3 times a week. And we started with, like 5 minutes session, and we increased it 2 minutes every time they came in until we worked up to 15-minute sessions. They do that before the neurofeedback as a warm up, and then they go through a 30-minute neurofeedback session. In both cases, they noticed improvement. Now, I can't tell you whether it would be any different without the helmet, but I think the helmet accentuated things. And then I've used the helmet separately, just to come in and have a session, just as kind of like a little tune-up and all that. And it seems to be helping the person maintain.
Hi, Rob. I have a unit as well, and I'm doing a similar program too. But I run it for 10 minutes before I start photobiomodulation. I'll put the neurofeedback recording on pause, and I'll run it.
Oh.
And then I resume it just to see where they've gone before and after, so we get a better idea.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say as an alternative to just doing it at the beginning, is to punctuate the session with stim. And that takes us to what Penny Jean Doubtfire has been doing with the modulation of the V-light using the BrainMaster.
Well, I will do that. I've got my other person coming in, one of them coming in tomorrow. I'll run her, what you say, 10 minutes and then pause the session, use the helmet, and then start the session up again.
Yep.
Now, do I need to remove the electrodes or just
Yeah,
leave
that
them
was
right
the
on?
next question I was
No,
thinking.
Just leave
no.
them on? Put the helmet on?
This level of stimulation is not such that you're going to heat up the electrodes.
Gotcha. All right.
And you can ask people, if you start to notice anything feeling warm, let me know.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's all.
Okay.
Yeah, and Judy,
Uh-huh.
the website's fixed.
That was
Carry
it.
on.
So when we're running them like a little baseline when they come in, I typically pause them when I'm running the photobiomodulation for 12 minutes or so, and then resume the recording to see where they've been. But sometimes I can run the recording while I'm doing photobiomodulation if I have the cushions in and that helmet's not pressing up against the cords anywhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The only thing then I can't take the cushions off. So sometimes, I like to have the cushions off so we get direct, especially if they have a bald head, you get direct contact.
I'm thinking that we need to get, yes, one of the things that I think would be helpful is cushions of different thickness.
Yeah.
So you might want to like use a razor blade and cut the cushions in half lengthwise, because you'll still get the Velcro effect.
Yeah.
Good.
And I also found out if the cords are touching, it just won't. Can't have the EEG cords touching the power cord of the photobiomodulation.
Definitely you learn
They're
that.
touching. Yeah.
Lesson learned.
This is Chris.
Apparently the poster was pretty clear, so nobody's commenting on the poster, which is fine. That to me is feedback. Did I lose you?
Nope,
No,
we
no,
hear
I
you.
want to,
Okay.
I want to comment on that first poster session you did.
Yeah.
Was it six years ago
Yeah.
with Rudy? Guy's
Rudy,
name?
that's V-Light.
Yeah, I know.
Rudy was the V-Light study, not me.
Right. Well,
Go ahead.
I think you were standing by the poster, but anyway,
Yes.
so it's got your fingerprints on it.
It's got my
Anyway.
fingerprints all over it. Okay, go ahead.
Lou commented in one of his two recent talks at ISNR that Rudy is still around and kicking. He's in his 90s now, and he's still going strong.
I am not surprised, and I can say that Joan, who I talk about as being, kind of patient zero for us, and Joan came with moderate to severe dementia and depression and agitation, and her husband was a really great guy, but he was really at the end of his rope. And we started with neurofeedback and photobiomodulation, and she took no medication for over 8 years other than supplements and neurofeedback and photobiomodulation, and she improved somewhat, but what she didn't get worse. And we were going strong for a good 6-7 years, and then it raised a philosophical and an important issue that I really get into with people, especially family members, and that's asking them, how long do you want this to go on? Because where we are with someone who's moderate to severe, we're not going to reverse the process and bring them back to going home, or we're not going to reverse the process that far. So the question is, what are what are you really expecting? And let's make sure we align our expectations. And John came to that realization after about 8 years and saw that we weren't going to get her any further. And so over the next 2 years, Joan declined some, and then she passed away. And that was last year. And it's a wonderful person, and I see that there's a real point where it's like, wait, the suffering for the family and the suffering of the person, it's just, you have to make some different decisions about what the efficacy of the treatment and what the point of the treatment is going to be. So even Dr. Bredesen, I was on his Facebook thing about a month ago, and he's coming around to the idea that a lot of these interventions are going to be most effective with people when we get them early enough. And early enough, that's now going to be a different topic of conversation. But one of the points that he made in the conversation that we had on Facebook was that when people are diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, they've actually been involved in the disease process for 10 to 15 years before they get diagnosed with MCI, let alone dementia. So we really need to be focused on getting people evaluated sooner, much, much, much sooner, and looking at the genetics and really taking seriously things like getting an OCT exam, a picture of your retina from the optometrist, and being able to analyze the amyloid beta load in the retinal tissue, because you can use that as a marker for predicting onset of symptoms 10 to 15 years ahead. So those are the kind of measures that we need to be incorporating as clinicians to be able to talk to people about where they're at and what they need to be thinking about doing, both in terms of functional medicine to deal with toxicity, but also in terms of building their capacity with photobiomodulation, and also then correcting the disrupted neural connectivity with neurofeedback.
Marvin, hi, it's Mario. Can you hear me?
Sure bet. Hi, Mario.
Hi. Well, with what you said, how would you categorize the traumatic brain injury? Because it seems like the BDNF might lend more healing to the tissues and could be quite a bit more helpful in that regard.
I think that TBI, we do know, and there's been a lot of evidence that even mild TBI will increase the likelihood of early onset dementia by 4 to 8 times.
Yeah.
So with that said, anybody with any kind of concussion history, any kind of TBI, anybody who's had to undergo general anesthesia should be focusing on doing something to remediate those kind of head traumas, because every general anesthesia is a head trauma.
So if we talk about ischemia and early prenatal exposures and such,
oh yeah,
we don't have the data for kids yet, but that would follow with that as well.
Well, the COVID challenges are I mean, that really is a whole other conversation for us to have when the papers that'll be coming out of Durham University in the UK come out in the next couple of months, because then we can kind of reconvene and look at those papers and talk about the potential for this kind of treatment for remediating the neurological deficits of COVID, as well as protection against infection and also reduction in the virulence of the infection. But there'll be more evidence about that in the next few months out of Durham. Yeah, I think there's a lot to be done, and we're going to be swamped with people on that side of the equation for a long time. And so getting these kind of interventions out there now for people is going to be all the more important to get people thinking about how they're going to take care of themselves in the long run, given that, you know, this whole pandemic thing is going to be with us for a lot longer than any of us want.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
How are we doing on time?
You're good. We're at 10 minutes to the hour, so we can take more questions if people
Marvin?
have it.
This is Carl Theodore. I'm just curious if you can give us perspective as to where does the 810 infrared, the intranasal, fit with client? You know, what kind of client would?
That's a good point. Thanks, Carl. I have, you know, I've made the point that there's no way to tell, and Lou hasn't really done the studies yet or published the studies yet that show that the photons from the intranasal can actually make a significant difference through the entorhinal cortex and get up into the frontal lobe. But what I do know is that our entire body's blood supply passes between our cheeks every 4 minutes. So now that we know that there's free-floating mitochondria in the blood, sticking a light up your nose starts to make sense in some ways, to irradiate all of the mitochondria that's passing through your face every 4 minutes. So if you take one of those intranasal devices, or you use the intranasal, or there's an intranasal device that the people in China who are making the helmet make. I mean, you know, there's plenty of those all around. You can stimulate your entire body's blood supply 5 times in 20 minutes. Now, what good that does, you know, I have no evidence, you know, I can't point to something and say, here, look, but, you know, I can make the logical inference that it's certainly going to be toward the good, because some of that blood is going to make it into your brain. So that's what I can tell you, Carl.
Yeah, and it's being sold for the gamma brainwave and the alpha brainwave. Could you contrast the two different options?
Again, it's the pulse rate is not going to influence the mitochondria as much. The pulse rate, yeah, the pulse rate is really going to be, I think it's something to think about in terms of entrainment, the impact on entrainment, but I think it also has something to do with, from a physics, you know, point of view, the constructive interference. So how the waves of photons land on top of each other will drive the waves deeper into the brain. That's the principle of constructive interference. So 40 times a second and 10 times a second, you're going to get more constructive interference by the 10 times a second. So for whatever that's worth on a brain level, okay. In terms of stimulating the blood, all you care about is that you're getting the photons to hit the cytochrome C oxidase in the mitochondria and have the cytochrome C absorb those photons and increase the production of ATP. I mean, that's the mechanism. That's one of the mechanisms of action of why photobiomodulation works and has an impact on a biological level. Does that help?
Yeah, thanks. So it's really a systemic. It's not necessarily just
absolutely systemic. Yeah.
Okay.
So the 633 and the 655 and yeah, all of those are systemic interventions that are going to stimulate to some degree are going to stimulate the cytochrome C.
Great. Thanks very much for the detail.
Sure.
I have a question.
Hey.
This is Carl Johnson. Carl. Hey, I was just had a little brain thought here that red blood cells don't have mitochondria.
Yeah, that's not true. The mitochondria is free floating in the blood.
Okay, but the red blood cells themselves
Doesn't
don't.
have
But
mitochondria, right?
but you have mitochondria free
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
floating.
We're both right. We're both right.
Okay, I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah, yeah, no. But by basic biology, yeah, yeah. But there's that was the new insight, was that there's free floating mitochondria in the bloodstream.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. So that's why getting one of those, $120,000 Thor laser beds might be a good thing. Oh, let's not end on that note, please.
All right. Well, do we have any other questions?
I've been using the device at 100 hertz for my neck aches. I slide that helmet back a little further,
Yep.
and it seems to loosen that up quite well. I don't know if it does it any better at 150 or 40. I haven't figured that out yet, but I was using the old V-Light gamma program to get some relief, but this seems to be more effective.
Right. Well, for those people who have the Atlantis technology or the Brainmaster Echo, they can modulate the pulse frequency of the V-Light, and the Neurofield people the X3000 will modulate the pulse frequency of the V-Light, the current V-Light headset and nasal applicator. So for whatever that's worth, but I think that functional medicine, photobiomodulation, and neurofeedback is the three-legged stool that we really need to be paying attention to. And that's why I keep wanting to come back here and talk with you all, because, I know that Richard is taking the whole idea of, systemic health and toxicity and, being able to modify that at the same time as doing the neurofeedback seriously. And I think that he's absolutely right in that regard. And I want to support that way of thinking about there being a three-legged stool that we all have to, accommodate to and support in our work with patients.
Just a quick question. Is it worth mentioning or discussing nitric oxide increase when you do photobiomodulation?
For those people who understand, yeah, the value of increasing nitric oxide to some degree and then inhibiting it to when it gets too high, yeah, because that certainly supports the gating and the opening of the channels and helping with cleansing and transmission of ions across the blood-brain barrier. So yeah, all of that stuff really does matter. But I don't want to get down too far into the weeds with folks who are doing neurofeedback, because it doesn't really, have a bearing. It's kind of like Dale Bredesen, asked me about peak alpha and theta beta ratios in the interview. And I was like, really? I don't know how useful this is going to be for the people from Sheboygan who want to get their husband to stop, wandering in the neighborhood.
True.
But
Thanks
anyway,
for your comments.
thanks a lot, guys. This has been very helpful for me. I appreciate your questions very much. And I hope we can get, some more of these devices into people's hands, and that'll help us fund our future research efforts. And I think I noted that everybody who's on the call certainly can chime in, order a unit, and we'll provide I think I said 15% discount.
I think that's what it was, but we can look it up.
Since I'm in charge, I'll make it official. It's a 15% discount.
All right.
All right.
Yeah. Well, we're at the top of the hour, Marvin. So we'll it's a good place to end. For those that are interested, go to the Quietmind Foundation website. This is just type in quietmindfdn.org. And you'll get to the website. There's the equipment he's got, here's about the website and the services and all that. Then they have the services and clinical trials and so forth. So if you want to read about some of this stuff and then contact Marvin, you're certainly welcome to do that. So thank you again.
You're very welcome, guys.
Marvin,
We'll be back. We'll be back. You know, when the new material comes out about COVID, I'll be happy to share that.
Yeah, yeah. Let Richard and I know, and we'll set up another time. And I'll be touching bases within the next couple of days. You stimulated a few thoughts for me this evening.
Right. I mean, and the one thing I will say is that I had COVID a year ago, April, and the reason I didn't go to the hospital was because I had the Cognitolite to use 4 times a day. And that's why my brain is not fried from having COVID.
Oh.
Yeah.
So carry on. Thank you for your attention and your questions. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Marvin.
And we'll be in touch. Take care.
All right. Okay. Good night, everybody. We'll see you Wednesday.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Wednesday.
Thank you. Bye-bye.